One of the craziest Rolex stone dials you'll ever see, some of Gerald Genta's most popular designs, and a literal piece of history. That is just a sample of 10 new crazy watches we have in inventory. Guys, let's just jump right into it. Welcome back. I'm Adam from Menta Watches, and we are going to be looking at 10 amazing new pieces we just got into inventory. Right off the bat, let's jump with the tried and true. My favorite, as everybody knows, the Rolex GMT-Master. This one is a reference 1675 with a matte dial. Towards the end of production, it has a Mark IV dial. It happens to be box and papers. If we open up the paperwork, this one was sold in, drumroll please, because I don't remember myself, 1979 in Bucherer. So the papers are from Bucherer, which is a famous retailer out of Switzerland, but this watch is absolutely spectacular. I absolutely love these later execution dials, and by later execution I mean Mark IV, Mark V, before they transitioned into the gloss style. Why? Because the plots are a little bit bigger, so it gives that bigger, puffier look, and also these dials tend to patina a little more orange and vibrant. This one has beautiful pumpkin patina, as a lot of collectors seem to really gravitate towards, and I do too, just because it's a really beautiful aesthetic. The condition on this example is excellent. The case has been lightly polished, but it is very strong. The dial and hands are absolutely perfect, and it comes with a solid black GMT bezel. Some people like it, other people prefer the Pepsi. Pepsi bezels are findable, and if a client really wanted one, we could find it for them, an original correct red back insert. I actually kind of like the all black insert. You don't really see it very often. Everybody wants that Pepsi bezel, and sometimes it's nice to change it up. Moving right along, while not a crazy rare watch, this one happens to be absolutely fantastic. It is a reference 16523 Zenith Daytona, the so-called Zenith Daytona, because it was made with a Zenith movement. It is Rolex's first automatic chronograph, and at the time the caliber 4030 was produced by Zenith because they did not have their own in-house automatic chronograph movement, and Zenith was the only brand that they trusted to make it. So this is from that early batch, first automatic chronograph Daytonas. This is a W serial from the 1990s, but like I said, it is absolutely spectacular condition wise. It has, before we get to the actual watch, absolutely everything with it. You see the sticker on the side of the box that says 16523, so you know that this box was actually for this watch. It has so much paperwork. It has hang tag, original receipts from Japan, papers, booklets, everything. It really has so much stuff. I'm not going to go through all of it and bore you guys, but it has a lot of accessories and stuff with it. But like I said before, you really don't find them in this condition. Being a watch that's 30 some years old, the case is unpolished. It still has the full sticker on the back, absolutely visible with no wear to it. This watch was barely worn at all. It is really crisp, and you can't just not love a Daytona with a black dial, especially with a little bit of gold in it. The black dials just really make these two-tone or solid gold Daytonas really pop. Really excellent watch. Just love having them this crisp. They are so hard to find like this. Moving along to another Rolex, and then we'll switch it up for a second, is we have the very first reference Explorer II. This is a reference 1655 Explorer II. These debuted in 1971. It was Rolex's beefier, more sporty version of the Explorer. Had a somewhat GMT function because you can't really rotate the bezel because it is a fixed steel bezel, but it did have a somewhat GMT function, date as well. This is the very first execution of the 1655 because there are several variants of it, and the easiest way to know that is by the seconds hand. These are called the Freccioni for the orange hand, but the seconds hand on the Mark I's are a straight hand as opposed to the ones that have a luminous dot or a little bubble at the end for a luminous marker. These watches are absolutely fantastic, and if you're looking for an Explorer but want something a little sportier and a little bit bigger, the Explorer II is the right option for you. The condition on this watch likewise is really nice. Has beautiful yellow patina, really strong thick case, original 9315 folded link bracelet. Really beautiful watch that are very hard to come by in nice condition these days. Moving away from Rolex for 1 second, let's talk about the two Genta icons we have in stock right now. I happen to be wearing one on my wrist, but this one is not going to be hitting the site quite yet. It is available, but we haven't photographed it yet for the website. But these two incredible watches are, first, my probably preference of the two. Hate to say it, but this is my favorite of the iconic Gerald Genta designs. This is an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak reference 5402, the very first Royal Oak ever produced, and their jumbo size because they did go on to make some smaller sizes. This is Serial A, so the first batch of 2,000 watches, and number 393, so it was very early on in production. For me, this is Genta's best design. I absolutely love the size of these watches. I love the way they feel on the wrist. Later generations of the Royal Oak, including modern day generations, for me are way too bulky. The bracelets are not comfortable, and these feel like butter on your wrist. They are the perfect size. These watches have this tapestry dial that age sometimes very gracefully and sometimes do not. This one remaining in absolutely excellent condition with very minimal peeling on the dial, still completely almost blue. Original dial, original hands, original bracelet with the Audemars Piguet logo spelled out as opposed to the later with just AP, like you see on this version of the 5402, which is a little bit later. Absolutely incredible watch. Really hard to find them like this. Really sharp case, just a beautiful piece. And the prices of these watches has come down a lot since their peak during COVID. Crazy pricing time. It's a great time to buy these watches. I think they're fantastic value. It is the genesis of everything that came later. And for me, they made it the best when they first introduced it, and everything since then has gotten just a little bit worse. But they're still fantastic watches, even the new models. But I just have a very big soft spot for the 5402. Moving on to Genta's maybe arguably more famous design, or on equal footing as the Royal Oak, we have a jumbo-sized Nautilus, but this is not any jumbo-sized Nautilus. This is a reference 3710. Why is the 3710 significant? Well, the 3710 was the reintroduction of Patek to the jumbo size. So the jumbo size was originally released in the first reference 3700, which was produced from the 70s to the late 80s. They discontinued that for a while and brought back the jumbo size with the 3710 in 1998. It is also the first Nautilus to feature a complication. So this one has a power reserve at the top of the dial. It's also nicknamed the Comet because the power reserve does look like a comet at the top of the dial. And I absolutely adore the 3710 because it is a matte black dial with applied steel Roman numerals. It is a very sleek looking watch as opposed to your normal run-of-the-mill 3700 that just has normal blue dial. These watches are absolutely stunning, and they're at a very massive discount compared to what you'll have to pay for a 3700. This one comes with its original Patek box and an extract from the archives from Patek confirming that it was produced in 1999, so the second year of production of the watch. It also is in fantastic condition, honestly one of the nicest we've ever seen. A beautiful watch, and it's so easy and lovely to wear. Again, I'm still probably partial to the 5402, but that's just me. Everybody's different. Amazing watches, both of them, and right around the same price point. Jumping back into Rolex for a second before we get to the crazy rare watch, we have also a crazy rare watch, not as crazy as the one I'm going to talk about next, but it is very, very interesting. A lot of our viewers might know it because we've talked about it before. It is the reference 1530 date. And at first glance, this watch looks like an Oyster quartz, but it is not an Oyster quartz, although it shares the same case design as the Oyster quartz, or the same case, rather. It is a reference 1530, meaning it was produced with an automatic movement. The going theory is that Rolex started to produce the Oyster quartz case in anticipation of producing their first quartz watch after the Texano 5100, which debuted in 1970. Their first real massive production quartz watch, because the Texano 5100 was considered technically a prototype. Anyways, before their Oyster quartz movement was ready, they had these cases, and they, as lore goes, fit them with automatic movements because the Oyster quartz movements were not ready yet. These were introduced in the early 70s. They're incredibly rare and also incredibly hard to find in good condition. This happens to be spectacular. I love how the inner rehod bezel has the lume dots still fitting around it, and most of these, the lume dots have been knocked off. It gives amazing 3D look to these watches. It's something interesting and rare that you won't see a lot of people wearing. Super niche, but super cool. And if you're looking for something in that dare to be different moment, this is certainly a watch to consider. Moving on, without further ado, one of the rarest stone dials that we've ever had in the office. This is a reference 18206. So what does that mean? That means it is a platinum watch. 6 at the end means platinum. 206 meaning it is a smooth bezel watch, but it is no ordinary platinum date. It has a factory Onyx dial. Onyx dials, you probably no stranger to seeing them, but you generally see them in yellow gold cases. There are only about a dozen or so, if I had to guess, known in white metal cases. The last one that I know of surfacing sold in Sotheby's a couple of years ago. I have not seen one since. They are very, very hard to track down. And like always, you really need to inspect all of these stone dials to ensure that they have no cracks or no hairlines or no flaws in the dial, as they are fragile and they are prone to crack from time to time. This one is fantastic. It is honest as they come. Lightly used watch with an unpolished case, but whoever owned this in the past certainly used it and enjoyed it, but did not beat it up. The dial is absolutely perfect. The case is still very strong. The bracelet is still very intact. And like I said earlier, it is an impossible watch to find. You do not see these come up very often. Maybe one every year or two will come up for sale and get snatched up very quickly. Up next, I guess it's technically a Rolex, but not really. We have a Tudor Monte Carlo reference 7149, a watch that we really wish we saw more of in this office, but we really don't, because usually they are absolutely trashed and we do not buy them. The reference 7149 was produced in, I think, in 1971 to 76 or 77. Somebody could fact check me on that. It is Tudor's chronograph that rivaled the Daytona. It was so called or nicknamed the Monte Carlo because collectors think the dial looks like a roulette wheel, and I kind of see it. This is my favorite version of all of the Monte Carlos. Why? Because the 7149 was produced with a Bakelite bezel. This one in particular is produced with a blue Bakelite bezel and matching blue dial. Probably the most desirable version of the Monte Carlo amongst collectors, and I completely understand why. Tudor reintroduced this watch with their Heritage Edition, almost replicating the watch one for one. For me, it's the coolest Tudor chronograph that they ever made of all time, period. And this one happens to be excellent. We pass on so many of these watches because the Bakelite's cracked or the dials are damaged, and the luminous material very often flakes off on these. This one is completely intact and absolutely lovely and perfect. And it's paining me not to keep this watch for myself, but it will be available and it is absolutely fantastic. And last but not least, we have two very special watches. Like I alluded to earlier, one of them is a literal piece of history, but before we get to that, we have a reintroduction of a piece of history. We have a CPCP Cartier, CPCP standing for Collection Privé, Cartier's special, more high-end line. This is the reference 2817. It was produced in 150 pieces in 1997 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Cartier, and was modeled after their original Jump Hour model produced in 1928 or something like that. It is called the Cartier Tank. Guys, forgive me for this pronunciation. If you guys watch the videos, you know I suck at French. Tank à Guichet. Sasha, tell me if that was right. Probably not. But anyways, 150 pieces were made. Extremely desirable watch, and extremely hard to find. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, guys. These watches have exploded in price since they've been introduced in 1997. I think when they came out, they were like $12,000 or something like that, and have since climbed, and we're now quickly approaching $200,000 for this watch, which is crazy, but it is a piece of history. It is, for me, one of the coolest watches Cartier's ever produced, and it is absolutely, by far, one of the most collectible. I absolutely love Jump Hour watches. I think they're very sleek. I think it is a very interesting interpretation of the Jump Hour in this tank style case, and it is one of the coolest watches to wear that I've personally worn in a very long time. Just so comfortable on the wrist, and really special piece. Without further ado, we have reached our final watch. I have left it face down on the table here. I'm still kind of in shock that we even have this watch. It's very rare to find watches that are literal pieces of history. You don't get them very often. You get really cool stuff that relate back to history, like the tank we just spoke about, or the Nautilus and Royal Oak from before, that are historical watches, but this is a literal piece of history. To give you guys some context, in 1969, to commemorate the successful moon landing, Omega gifted several watches to the astronauts aboard that mission, as well as several other astronauts, and they produced 26 solid gold Speedmasters, reference 145022-69BA, BA standing for yellow gold, the original solid gold Speedmaster. The 26 watches were gifted to various astronauts on the Apollo 11 mission and on various other missions. In fact, the first two, numbers 1 and 2, were gifted to President Richard Nixon and Vice President Spiro Agnew, but at the time, politicians did not accept gifts from any organizations or the public, so those two watches can be found in the Smithsonian All of the other Speedmasters and other astronaut watches, several of them have hit the market. A couple are owned, I think, by Omega themselves, and a couple of them are still owned privately, presumably by the astronauts themselves or by the families of the astronauts. This watch here happens to be watch number 4 of 26. It was gifted posthumously because the astronaut passed away in a fire before going to space on a mission. His name was Virgil Gus Grissom, and interestingly enough, because he was gifted this watch after he'd already passed away, the watch remains in absolutely spectacular condition. It was worn, but very, very lightly. The case is unpolished. Everything on it is crisp. Everything is spectacular. On the case back, you will see that Omega engraved the watch. Astronaut Virgil I. Grissom, to mark man's conquest of space with time, through time, on time. Mercury 4, Gemini 3, which commemorates the missions that he was actually successfully a part of. And this is the only known example of the 26, or at least that I know of, that still has its original box. And why is this box important? Let me show you. It has a plaque on the front of the box that reads, Astronaut Virgil I. Gus Grissom, Astronaut Virgil Grissom. It has the same engraving that was put on the back of the case back and has number 4 on the case to show that this is the 4th watch of the 26 produced. Like I said, guys, like it almost leaves me speechless. The watch in and of itself, these gold 1969 Speedmasters are fantastic watches and amazing to have in stock and very difficult to find in good condition, but to find a perfect one that was also a literal piece of history that was gifted to somebody who went to space. I think Gus Grissom was actually the 2nd man ever in space, is really like, I don't know. I'm speechless. I think this is the 2nd watch we've ever had that was a literal piece of history. The first being a watch made by Bulova that was gifted to a president. This is the 2nd, which was gifted to an astronaut. I really hope this finds a deserving home, somebody who appreciates Omega, appreciates Speedmasters, and who appreciates space exploration. You really don't see these come up a lot for sale. There's been several sold in auction. This actual watch sold in auction a couple years ago for $375,000, if I recall, but the price doesn't really matter. It's just, you don't get to own something like this. You own something that takes your breath away, and that literally, I don't feel like I deserve to even hold in my hands, but I will gladly cherish and own it and pass it on to its next custodian, and whoever that person is going to be very, very happy and very, very lucky. That about wraps it up for 10 new watches that just came into inventory. I really hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. If you're interested in any of these watches, they will be available on the website with more information and pictures, and as always, you can email myself or Jordan for more information. Guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Anything you could do to help us grow the channel, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.